This is impossible. Karen's voice, usually smooth and commanding, faltered as he stared at the screen. His slitted eyes tracked the figure of the human soldier, motionless, seemingly unaffected by the Valdar's latest weapon. Behind him, the command center hummed with activity, but no one dared to speak. Karen tightened his grip on the edge of the console. The sound weapon should have incapacitated every human on that battlefield. Waves of subsonic frequency targeted the strange, bulging growths on their heads, assumed to be the central nerve relay. Every living thing on Earth, including these frail creatures, was vulnerable to it, or so he had believed. Captain Sarah Blake, standing amidst the chaos of the battleground, felt the hum in her skull like a faint echo. Her team should have been on the ground, writhing in pain, but they weren't. Around her, her soldiers were stunned, yes, but still on their feet. They exchanged confused looks, clutching their heads as if trying to figure out why the alien weapon hadn't shattered them. Sarah focused on the strange sensation, the vibration moving through her head and chest, not painful, but almost alive. Her heart pounded as understanding flickered on the edges of her mind. "This isn't right," muttered Sergeant Diaz, his voice shaking. "We should be down. What the hell is going on?" Sarah turned to her team, her mind racing. "Stay calm, Diaz. There's something they don't know about us, and I intend to find out what it is before they figure it out." A loud crackle pierced the air. The Valdar fleet hung ominously above them, dark silhouettes against a bruised sky. Sarah's attention shifted upward. Her years of command had sharpened her instincts, and something in this attack felt experimental. The Valdar weren't just trying to crush humanity, they were testing something. Back in his command ship, Karen's frustration mounted. He had been so sure of his plan. His second-in-command, Lurik, approached with uncertainty etched in his every movement. "Commander, the humans are still standing. The frequency appears to have failed?" Karen hissed. "It cannot have failed. Increase the output. They cannot be immune to our weapon." Sarah felt the pulse intensify, a low hum rising in her ears, but instead of pain, the sensation became clearer, sharper. It was as if her body was tuning into the frequency, syncing with the energy. She locked eyes with Diaz. "We're not breaking," she said, realization dawning. "They've misunderstood something about us." Karen's fleet emitted a deeper resonance, but still, no human fell. Sarah's pulse quickened, and she knew something ancient, something long forgotten, was awakening inside her people. These vibration sensors the aliens had targeted weren't weaknesses. They were something else entirely, something the Valdar couldn't comprehend. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Prepare the ground forces. If the weapon fails, we'll tear them apart the old-fashioned way." But Sarah had already made her decision. Diaz spread the word. "We move in 5. They think they have us figured out, but they're wrong. They won't see us coming." As her team prepared to charge, the vibration hummed stronger inside her, like a silent promise of power. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling more alive than ever before. The Valdar had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the very thing that would be their downfall. And she was about to show them just how wrong they were. The low hum in Sarah Blake's head deepened, vibrating through her bones as her team gathered around her. It wasn't a sensation of pain, but a signal, a steady pulse of energy growing stronger with each passing second. Sarah's heart raced as she glanced at her soldiers, all of them visibly shaken but still standing. They were more than surviving, they were adapting. "Captain," Diaz said, his voice tense but steady, "what do we do now? That frequency, it's changing us, isn't it?" Sarah looked at him, understanding the weight of his words. There was no denying it. Their bodies were reacting in ways they couldn't yet explain, but it wasn't random. It was purposeful. Calculated. "We hold the line," she replied firmly. "The Valdar think they've discovered a flaw in us. Instead, they've triggered something they don't understand. We're going to turn it back on them." She motioned toward the distant horizon where the Valdar ships hovered like blackened monoliths. A sickly, greenish glow pulsated from their hulls, a clear sign the next wave of attacks was imminent. Sarah knew the aliens wouldn't hold back this time. They were testing, learning, just as much as she was. Inside the command center of the Valdar flagship, Karen stood motionless, eyes fixed on the battlefield below. The humans still weren't reacting as they should have. Their nervous systems should be in chaos, their bodies reduced to helpless forms as the sonic barrage took hold. Instead, they continued to stand, fight, resist. "What are we missing?" Karen muttered, his frustration boiling beneath his calm demeanor. He turned to Lurik, his second in command, whose expression mirrored his confusion. "Their physiology defies logic," Lurik replied. "We've increased the frequency to levels that should disrupt every neural pathway in their system. They shouldn't be able to withstand it. And yet they do," Karen hissed, pacing toward the control panel. "Increase the intensity. We'll push them to the breaking point." Back on the battlefield, the air trembled as the Valdar unleashed their next strike. A high-pitched whine, piercing and relentless, filled the sky, and the ground vibrated under the weight of the sound. Sarah braced herself as the sensation in her head shifted again. The vibration wasn't just a hum anymore, it was a surge, like the build-up before a thunderstorm. Her soldiers gritted their teeth, some clutching their heads, but none fell. The frequency rippled through them, but they stood their ground. Sarah could see it in their eyes, fear mixed with something else. Determination. They were beginning to feel it too, the strange power within them responding, evolving. "They're pushing us," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "But they don't realize that every time they do, they're making us stronger." Diaz frowned. "How do we fight back if we don't even know what's happening to us?" Sarah's lips curved into a grim smile. "We don't need to know. We just need to adapt faster than they can destroy us." As if on cue, a Valdar warship descended lower, its energy weapons charging for a ground assault. The sonic waves intensified, but something inside Sarah clicked. The pulsing vibrations aligned with the beat of her heart, synchronizing perfectly. She could feel her body absorbing the energy, converting it into raw strength. "We're not breaking," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "We're evolving." She glanced at Diaz and the rest of her team. "We take the fight to them. Whatever this is, this power, it's ours now. And we're going to use it." The chapter ended with the warship's weapons primed, tension high as Sarah and her soldiers braced for what was coming next. The Valdar believed they had the upper hand, but they had underestimated the resilience of humanity, and the awakening of something far greater. The battlefield was still, but it was a deceptive calm. Sarah stood at the front of her squad, her senses attuned to the rhythmic hum coursing through her veins. The Valdar warship hovered ominously overhead, its weaponry locked onto her team. The ground beneath their feet vibrated with the energy of the sonic attack, yet Sarah's body, and those of her soldiers, felt more alive than ever before. "They're about to fire," Diaz muttered, gripping his weapon tighter. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp, focused. Sarah narrowed her gaze at the warship. "Let them. This is what we've been waiting for." Her calm demeanor masked the storm building within her. Every cell in her body buzzed with anticipation, the alien vibrations resonating with something primal. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was evolution. The humans weren't just enduring the assault, they were harnessing it. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed from the ship above. A beam of crackling energy shot down from the Valdar vessel, its destructive force undeniable. Time seemed to slow as Sarah watched it descend, her heart pounding in sync with the vibrations. The beam hit the ground, sending a shockwave rippling out. But the expected devastation never came. Instead, Sarah felt an intense surge of power through her. She braced herself, standing tall against the onslaught, her skin tingling as the energy washed over her. Around her, her soldiers gasped, not in pain, but in astonishment. The weapon had no effect. The energy pulsed through them, absorbed into their very being, fueling something deep and ancient within. "We're still here," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with awe and defiance. Diaz looked at her, eyes wide. "How is this possible?" Sarah smiled, the realization settling in fully. "It's not just that we're resistant, Diaz. We're adapting, evolving beyond anything they anticipated. She clenched her fists, feeling the raw power coursing through her veins. The Valdar had tried to crush them with sound and energy, but instead, they had unlocked something far more dangerous. Sarah turned her gaze toward the ship above, her heart racing with a new purpose. We need to strike back, she said, her voice hardening. Before they figure out what's happening. Her team rallied behind her, emboldened by the discovery of their newfound resilience. The Valdar's attacks had empowered them, but it wasn't enough to survive. They needed to fight, to reclaim the ground that had been stolen from them. Sarah raised her hand, signaling for her squad to move. We push forward, she ordered. Take out their ground forces first, then we'll deal with the ship. Her soldiers followed her lead, their confidence restored. They moved with precision, cutting through the alien troops with efficiency. Sarah's mind raced as they fought, piecing together the strategy. The Valdar would adapt too if given enough time, but she couldn't afford them that luxury. They had to hit hard and fast. As they advanced, the Valdar ground forces faltered, clearly unnerved by the humans' ability to withstand their weapons. Sarah could see the panic ripple through their ranks. She felt a grim satisfaction at their confusion. But the moment of victory was short-lived. A screeching roar erupted from the sky, and the Valdar warship began descending rapidly. It was preparing for a direct engagement. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized what was happening. They were being drawn into a final confrontation. They're coming down to finish this, Diaz shouted over the comms, his voice strained. Sarah locked her gaze on the ship, her determination hardening into steel. Good. Let them come. This ends now. With a final push, her team overran the last of the alien ground forces, clearing a path toward the descending warship. Sarah's breath came in steady, controlled gasps as she prepared for the final assault. They've underestimated us for the last time, she muttered under her breath. As the massive Valdar ship loomed overhead, its weapons glowing with deadly intent, Sarah knew there was no turning back. Whatever humanity had become, whatever they were evolving into, this was their moment to prove it. And she would lead the charge. The Valdar warship cast an immense shadow over the battlefield, its engines roaring as it descended. Its weapons hummed with lethal energy, ready to obliterate the humans once and for all. But Sarah Blake stood tall, her pulse synchronized with the vibrations in the air, her resolve unshaken. Her squad gathered behind her, their expressions mirroring her determination. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was a war to reclaim what was theirs. They're going to unload everything they've got, Diaz muttered, his eyes fixed on the ship. His face was streaked with grime, but there was a fire in his gaze. Sarah clenched her fists, feeling the energy crackling just beneath her skin. Then we give them everything we've become. The Valdar ship unleashed a blinding beam of energy, scorching the earth as it swept toward them. But Sarah was no longer afraid. The pulsing vibrations in her head intensified, her body humming in tune with the attack. She raised her hand, instinctively reaching toward the oncoming wave, and felt the energy bend around her like wind around a mountain. Her soldiers, too, braced themselves, their bodies absorbing the impact rather than crumbling beneath it. We can do this, Sarah said, her voice steady. Focus. Feel the energy. It's not a weapon anymore, it's power. The beam dissipated, and for the first time, the Valdar faltered. Inside the command center of the warship, Karen watched in disbelief. His alien eyes widened as the human soldiers, once so fragile, now stood untouched by their most devastating attack. Impossible, Karen whispered, his hands tightening on the control panel. No species can adapt this fast. They were weak. They should have been broken. Lurik, standing beside him, glanced nervously at the readings. The humans, they're absorbing the energy. It's amplifying their strength. Karen slammed his fist on the console. We cannot allow them to survive this. Initiate the self-destruct sequence. If we fall, we'll take them with us. Back on the ground, Sarah's eyes narrowed as the ship's engines flared. Something was wrong. The hum in the air changed, shifting from the steady pulse of their attacks to a chaotic, desperate frequency. It wasn't a weapon, it was a warning. They're going to crash the ship. Sarah realized, her voice low. They're planning to destroy everything. Her heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her system. The power coursing through her wasn't just a defense, it was a lifeline. She could feel the vibrations like a map, tracing the energy source deep within the Valdar warship. If she could just reach it, just one final push, she could stop them. We don't have much time, she said, turning to Diaz and the others. I need to get inside that ship. Diaz's eyes widened. What? How? We'd never survive a direct assault. We don't need to, Sarah replied, her voice calm but urgent. They've been feeding us energy this whole time. It's time we give some back. Without waiting for a response, Sarah sprinted toward the ship, her body moving faster than she'd ever thought possible. The vibrations in the air resonated with her every step, guiding her like an unspoken force. The warship loomed above, massive and intimidating, but she felt no fear, only purpose. The ground shook as the ship's engines began to overload. Sarah reached the hull, her hand pressing against the metal, feeling the raw energy pulsing beneath it. Closing her eyes, she focused, channeling every ounce of power she had absorbed. The vibrations intensified, swirling around her like a storm. She felt the ship's core, the energy driving its destructive countdown. With a final surge, Sarah let the power flow from her, flooding the ship's systems. The vibrations synced, disrupting the Valdar's control. Inside the ship, alarms blared as Karen and Lurik scrambled to stop the meltdown, but it was too late. No! Karen hissed, watching helplessly as the energy unraveled. They've reversed it. Outside, the warship's engines sputtered and died, the green glow fading as the ship slowly descended, no longer a threat but a broken husk. Sarah stepped back, panting, her body tingling with the last remnants of power. Behind her, her soldiers cheered, the weight of victory washing over them. Diaz approached, shaking his head in disbelief. You did it, Captain! We're still here. Sarah gave a weary smile. We all did. Humanity isn't as weak as they thought. As the Valdar ship lay in ruins, the battlefield grew quiet. The vibrations in the air faded, but the change in Sarah and her team remained. They had evolved, not just to survive, but to triumph. And now, they were ready for whatever came next.